Today's number 20 most urgent vulnerability is CVE 2026-71955, a critical command injection flaw in D-Link DWR-M961 devices. And the reason it earns time on the Daily Ranked CVE Brief is simple. This is the kind of router issue where the vulnerable component sits at the edge of a network, takes remote input, and can end in command execution as root. That combination changes the risk calculation. Even though this CVE is not listed in CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, the CVSS score is 9.8 critical, and the EPSS percentile is 0.80201, meaning it ranks relatively high in predicted exploitation likelihood compared with many tracked vulnerabilities. Our job here is not to dramatize it, it is to answer the practical question. If you own or manage these devices, what do you patch first, what do you check, and what should defenders watch right now? The official NVD description says D-Link DWR-M961 devices with hardware version C1 and software version 1.1.2_C1 WBA26012.044 contain a command injection vulnerability in the /boafrm formWsc interface. It also names 4 fields: local pin, target APSS ID, peer pin, and peer RPT pin. A remote attacker can inject arbitrary malicious commands into those fields, resulting in command execution with root privileges. The weakness classification is CVE-78, improper neutralization of special elements used in an operating system command. In plain English, the device appears to take user-supplied input and pass it into a place where the operating system interprets commands. If that input is not safely handled, text that should be just data can become instructions. On a router, that is especially serious, because the device is not just another endpoint. It helps route traffic, enforce connectivity, and often sits between trusted users and the outside world. The verdict: this is a near maximum severity bug because it can be reached remotely, without authentication, and can lead to full device compromise. We do not need to recite every CVSS metric to understand the risk. The two that matter most are attack vector and privileges required. The vector is network, meaning exploitation is assessed as possible over a network path, rather than requiring local access. Privileges required is none, meaning the attacker does not need to already have an account on the device. User interaction is also none, so the model does not depend on tricking an administrator into clicking something first. The impact side is high for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That aligns with the NVD description. Command execution with root privileges. If an attacker can run commands as root, they may be able to read sensitive configuration, alter device behavior, disrupt service, or use the device as a foothold. CVE 2026-1795 is not currently marked as a CISA known exploited vulnerability in the data for this brief. That matters because KEV listing is one of the strongest public signals that exploitation has been observed. But not being in KEV is not the same thing as being low priority. Here, the other signals still push it upward. A 9.8 critical CVSS score, unauthenticated remote reachability, root level impact, and an EPSS percentile of 0.80211. The practical danger is that routers are often under-inventoried and slower to patch than servers or laptops. They may run for years with minimal attention, and they often have management services that were enabled for convenience. A compromise of a router can affect more than the router itself. It can affect availability for users behind it, the trustworthiness of routing and network behavior, and the security boundary between internal systems and external networks. Conceptually, the attack path is straightforward, which is why defenders should treat it seriously. The vulnerable component is the /boafrm formWsc interface, and the NVD description identifies specific fields that can carry malicious command content. A remote attacker does not need prior privileges, according to the CVSS vector. The risk appears when that remote input crosses a trust boundary, from a web-facing or network-reachable form field into logic that invokes operating system commands. If the device fails to separate data from commands, the operating system can interpret attacker-controlled text as something to execute. We are intentionally not walking through requests, payloads, or proof-of-concept behavior. For defense, the key point is reachability. If untrusted networks can reach the relevant management surface, the exposure is much more serious. If access is limited to a tightly controlled administrative network, risk is reduced, but patching still matters because root-level command execution is the worst category of device-side outcome. To check whether you are affected, start with inventory. Look specifically for D-Link DWR-M961 devices, then verify the hardware version and software version against the official vendor advisory. The NVD description names hardware version C1 and software version 1.1.2_C1 2026-011-0044. But defenders should still defer to D-Link's advisory for the exact affected and fixed status, because vendor guidance is the authoritative source for supported remediation. Next, check where the device's administrative interface is reachable from. Is it exposed to the public internet? Is it reachable from guest networks? Is it reachable from broad internal user segments that do not administer networking gear? Those are exposure questions, not exploitation steps. If you do not have centralized asset management, search procurement records, network diagrams, DHCP reservations, firewall objects, and remote site equipment lists. Small routers can hide in branch offices, temporary deployments, and backup connectivity setups. The first action is to follow the D-Link security advisory and apply the vendor-recommended remediation for affected devices. Do not rely only on isolation if a fix is available. Because the impact is command execution with root privileges, this should be treated as a priority maintenance item for any exposed or business-critical deployment. In parallel, reduce reachable attack surface. Administrative interfaces on edge devices should not be open to the public internet unless there is a very specific, controlled reason. Limit management access to trusted administrator networks or secured management paths. Review firewall rules, remote administration settings, and segmentation around the device. Use strong administrative credentials and remove unnecessary access paths. But remember, this CVE is scored with no privileges required, so password strength alone is not the fix. If vendor guidance recommends replacement, upgrade, configuration change, or other lifecycle action, follow that guidance and document completion across every deployed unit. For detection and monitoring, focus on deviations from normal router behavior. If you log administrative access, look for unexpected requests to the management interface, especially from networks or source addresses that should not administer the device. Watch for unusual timing, repeated errors, or activity against the interface outside maintenance windows. At the device and network level, investigate unexplained reboots, configuration changes that do not match a ticket, loss of connectivity, DNS or routing changes, or new outbound connections from the router that are not part of its normal role. If you collect firewall or flow data, compare current behavior to a baseline. Which internal hosts normally talk to the router, which external destinations the router normally reaches, and whether that pattern suddenly changes. Because the described impact is root command execution, also treat unexplained persistence-like behavior, recurring configuration drift, or services reappearing after changes as signs that deeper investigation may be needed. Bottom line, CVE 2026-71955 is today's number 20 most urgent vulnerability because it combines a critical 9.8 score, remote unauthenticated reachability, command injection, and root-level execution on a network edge device. It is not in CISA-KEV in today's data, but the EPSS percentile and the technical impact make it a patch now item for affected D-Link DWR-M961 deployments. Your defensive checklist is clear. Identify the devices, verify hardware and software against the vendor advisory, apply the recommended remediation, restrict management access, and monitor for abnormal administrative and network behavior. This is the Daily Ranked CVE Brief, what to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal from CISA-KEV, first EPSS, and CVSS every day. Subscribe for the next ranked breakdown, and check the full ranked report linked in the description.